Hi, welcome. I'm Brenda Scott, and this talk is called Homeschooling a Child Who Fights It. I gave this talk at Teach Them Diligently 2026 in Pigeon Forge, and I thought I would record it for all of you online. So I've been married almost 27 years to my husband, Carrie. I'm the mom of 6 kids and the grandma to 1 baby boy. It's almost a year. We adopted 4 kids. So we had 2 biological, adopted 4. We fostered 11 kids who've come into our home for a season and then left. I've been homeschooling since our 24-year-old son, Isaac, was 2. So I was kind of ambitious. I don't necessarily recommend that. But that's what I did. So 4 out of 6 of our kids have graduated now. And then 1 out of 6 so far has graduated from college. I live in Maryville, Tennessee with my family for almost a year now. We lived in Virginia for 5 years. Before that in Lynchburg near Liberty University. And before that, I lived most of my life in Oregon. So I've either finished homeschooling or am in the middle of homeschooling kiddos with dyslexia, kids who didn't read until the age of 9, a 26-week preemie whose failure to thrive, had a feeding tube, is partially blind, and had other medical complications. 4 kiddos adopted from trauma. Kiddos whose birth moms used illegal substances. Kids with reactive attachment disorder, and no official diagnosis of ADHD or ADD, but I'm pretty sure we have that too. Our first 3 kids were boys. So the middle one in this picture is our son Isaac. He's the oldest. So Isaac was born at 26 weeks gestation, and he had a lot of medical issues, and like I mentioned, partial blindness and weak muscle tone and failure to thrive, and then cyclic vomiting on top of all of that. So he's the one in that middle picture. He's got a feeding tube hooked up to him. 13 months after Isaac was born, I gave birth to our son Caleb. I had to be on bed rest for 4 months with Caleb to keep him from coming out too early. I had to have multiple shots to prevent labor. And Caleb was born a month early, a planned C-section. He grew pretty fast for his age and was very social. By the age of 6 months, he was passing clothes down to his underweight older brother. So 11 months after Caleb's birth, we got a call from someone at church. We had told people that someday we wanted to adopt. We had tied my tubes after having Caleb because I just can't seem to keep a baby in. They want to be born way too early, or at least my body wants to have them be born way too early. And so we knew that eventually we wanted to adopt someday. And actually, I wrote a book about adoption if you want to see that and see our story about adoption, our stories. We have multiple now. But so we got a call when Caleb was just 11 months old asking if we wanted a baby. So that was our son Noah. So Isaac is in the middle here. Caleb is the one on the right, the blonde-haired one. And then the dark-haired one on the left is our son Noah. And that was shortly after Noah came to our home. So it took 14 months to get Noah because it was a complicated situation with a foster care system and different counties and all of that. But then he joined our home, our family, and our boys were 3, 2, and 1. So life was a little chaotic. So a few years later, we adopted the first of our 3 daughters. And so this little one on my lap there is our daughter Ruby as an infant. So just for fun, I want you to picture with me what my story times would look like with my kids. So I would sit down to read, and Isaac would want to sit on one side of me. He'd usually be holding something he was really in thought about. And then Caleb would want to sit super close on the other side. He was very snuggly and wanted to sit like kind of maybe too close for some people's comfort. So he wanted to sit really close. And then Isaac seemed really quiet and deep in thought as I read. Caleb sat with big eyes and lots of questions. He pointed at the book a whole lot and he talked more than I did, actually. So notice that Noah isn't even in this picture, and that's because usually Noah was hiding under the coffee table, playing with a stuffed animal, trying to make his brothers laugh, and just being silly. So at the end of the story, I would ask the boys to narrate to me what they had just heard, or to just tell me back what they heard in that story. Caleb could tell the whole story and just go on and tell me the whole thing. Noah would just giggle. And Isaac couldn't tell me about the story, but he'd ask as if he'd been just holding it in for so long and it was really difficult for him to hold on. He'd ask me if he could have a stack of index cards, some tape, and some paper clips because he had an idea for an invention and he wanted to make it right away. So that was how story time went with the boys. They're also different, and it's sometimes difficult to know how to homeschool such unique little people. So here's a picture of the first 4 kids reading together. I love that you can see their personalities in this photo. You can see the giggling. So remember how I said that Noah would be super giggly while I read? Ruby watched whatever Noah did and giggled right along with him. She's 18 now and still laughs at his jokes. So we had some foster kids who came and left. And then when Ruby was 7, we got another call asking if we would consider adopting a 5-year-old daughter. And that's our daughter, Briella, who I'm holding in this picture. Here we are a few years later in Jamestown. We took a road trip around the country in 2018 from Oregon all the way to the East Coast and then back. We're doing that again this coming summer, so be watching for my posts about that. I'm excited to share what we see. I like to see a lot of homeschool stops. We fostered more kids who came and left. We moved across the country from Oregon to Virginia, so that was another cross-country trip, but we didn't go back. Noah joined the Army, and then he got married, and we were asked if we would consider adopting a 9-year-old, which is our daughter, Elena. Here's a picture of the kids who lived at home. At that time, Noah wasn't home that Christmas and his wife Haley weren't home. But so here are 5 of the 6 kids without Noah and his wife Haley. So they had our first grandbaby, Levi, last June. So this June, he will be 1 year old. And then we moved from Virginia to Tennessee after that to be near family who had left Oregon in 2019 and moved to Tennessee. So we joined them finally. We were able to. And Noah and Haley moved from Indiana to join us. This is our family this Easter. So this is our daughter-in-law Haley and our grandson Levi with all of the rest of our kids. You can see. And then these are, this is the most recent photo of the 3 boys together and then the 3 girls together. So they're now 24, 23, 18, 16, and almost 11. So time truly flew, and I hope that's an encouragement for you. God has blessed us with a really special and beautiful family, and also our road hasn't been easy. So that's why I'm here to share with you today and why I even have things to share. So the reality is, some kids fight homeschooling. Behaviors might include eye rolling, tantrums, complaints, avoidance, torn papers, broken pencils, and silliness. We need to figure out the why. So we've homeschooled kids who fought it in a variety of ways. And we've really had to become detectives and sleuth out why in order to help them. Today, I'm going to talk about some of the reasons we've discovered and then some of the tricks we've learned along the way. If you're dealing with behavioral issues like eye rolling, tantrums, complaints, crumpled up papers, broken pencils, holes in math pages that were erased way too hard, and probably sacks in math, and if you know what I mean, you know what I mean there, and you find yourself wondering if it might just be easier to give up on homeschooling, you're listening to the right video right now. Let's talk about some of the reasons kids might fight homeschooling. Number one, consider learning disabilities. This is first. So, and first off, I want to say, I want to always assume, I think we should always assume the best of the child. So let's not jump to they're disobeying here because, they're just naughty or they're just a bad kid. I think let's always jump to best thoughts about that child. So, first thing, consider learning disabilities. Behavior can hide confusion. So, let's look at the attitude and see the heart. So, do the kids really understand what's being taught? So many kids use attitude to hide the fact that they don't really understand what's going on. Some kids use silliness. They'll just be goofy during homeschool, and you wonder, like, why can't they just settle down? And some are just plain grumpy and moody, and you wonder what is going on. Step back and pay attention to the heart of your child. The outer behaviors are sometimes so loud it's really hard to see what's going on, but it's important to do so. Pray that God would help you discern whether or not your child is struggling in some area. Learning disabilities can be addressed in so many great ways. Here's some things that have worked for us. So, cognitive therapy. In Virginia, we worked with somebody, and if you're in the Lynchburg area, comment and let me know, and I'll give you the information for exactly who we worked with because they're really great. So we worked with some people who worked on working memory and letter sounds and problem solving and multiplication facts and handwriting. And there were just a lot of memory games, and it was so good. So the program that they use is called Equipping Minds through Carol Brown. And you can go on her website, Carol Brown's Equipping Minds website, and you can find somebody who does this in your area. So we've also done vision therapy. So we did this in Oregon through an eye doctor for eye tracking. We actually did it with our son who was blind in one eye because his other eye was still having trouble like tracking. And he had trouble learning how to read because of it. So we went to a vision therapist and worked on eye tracking. But when we did this program in Virginia, it included doing a program online called IQ Advantage. So this is really helpful if your child is skipping lines or losing their place as they read, or just having trouble following a sentence all the way through. So audio therapy. Again, we did this through the Carol Brown Equipping Minds program, and this entailed 3 hours per day of listening to specific classical music that's really good for the brain. So the equipment for this, it's nice because it doesn't have anything besides that audio on it, so your child can't like switch to something else or switch to radio. But it is kind of pricey. And so another thing that I've done, and I've got a link to this on my blog, is I've made a Spotify playlist called Brain, where I just went and found music that's good for the brain, a lot of it by Mozart. And what we've done is we've recorded this onto, or music like this onto a Yodo player. So you can't exactly copy Spotify music onto a Yodo card, but you can find music like this on the internet and copy it onto a make your own card for a Yodo player. A Yodo player, to me, I grew up with cassette tapes and Walkmans, and it's really going back to the simplicity of that kind of technology because all there is on a Yodo player is whatever the card is you're trying to listen to. Just like a Walkman, really the only thing you can do is listen to that tape that you put in it. So I like that because there's no screen, there's no ability to get on the internet or to get onto other radio stations that you wouldn't want your children listening to. So that's what we do. So then we've used neurological repatterning. And this means crawling exercises to copy what a baby would do. So crawling and exercises, there's two different things there. To copy what a baby would do inside and outside of the womb while their brain is developing. Because all of the movements that a baby is making over and over and over, like bringing their thumb up to their mouth, looking like they're about to suck on it over and over and over, those are actually doing things inside the brain. Those movements go along with brain development. And so sometimes, and there's testing that actually can be done on kids through people who do neurological repatterning. Sometimes kids missed a step, especially if your child went straight from belly crawling to standing up and skipped hands and knees crawling, or if they never did belly crawling and they just very quickly got up on their hands and knees, or if they learned to walk really, really early, they might have missed some of this brain development. Or if they were living through trauma, any kind of trauma, this could have been a child who was in foster care, or it could have just been simple, what we think of as just like basic life trauma, like moving houses during a critical stage in their life, or going through a medical problem, or a family member going through a major medical problem during that time. They might have missed some brain development. And so you can do neurological repatterning. One fun test to do with your kids, try this, is to have them crawl on their belly. Tell them the only rule is that their belly button needs to stay on the floor and you want them to crawl from a certain point to another certain point, maybe across a room. Now watch your child. Don't comment on this and don't tell them you're watching for this, but watch to see if they use their legs. Because a child who's already past crawling and walking should know that they can use their legs to move their belly, move their body across a floor. They should know that. But if they don't, if they automatically just like really struggle when they're crawling across a floor, then you can see right then and there that they're missing some brain development. And so one way to solve this is just actually have them crawl every day. Spend 15 minutes. Just keep telling them to crawl like that on their belly. And eventually you're going to see they will start using their legs. It's like their brain develops in such a way that it starts realizing, wow, there's legs here. I can use these to make my way across the floor. So anyways, try that. It's a little trick. So another tool that we've used is rhythmic movement training. So, and that's something that we used with the people in Virginia that we worked with. So it's easier than neurofeedback. It gives, or not neurofeedback, sorry, it's easier than neurological repatterning. It's less time per day. And so that's nice. It's quick, it gets quick results. But it's really similar to neurological repatterning. So either program is excellent. So we did repatterning for many years with our children, and then we found rhythmic movement and did that. Neurofeedback. So we found success with neurofeedback for behavioral issues like screaming, a lot of screaming. So I think just a high stress level in a child's brain, neurofeedback helped calm that down very effectively for our family. It can sometimes be helpful for learning struggles, but it was not for our family. So I want to just be clear about that. So neurofeedback helped with lowering stress, but it was not useful for another child's cognitive struggles. So cognitive therapy through the Equipping Minds program was a much better fit for that child. So each child is so unique, and different things will work for each different kid. So try what works best, but neurofeedback is quite expensive. So the child that it didn't do anything for, we spent about $2,000. So just use that as a last resort, I guess, if none of these other things are working for you. So specific help for dyslexia. So 3 out of 6 of our children have had dyslexia. So if you have a student with dyslexia, the 2 best options really out there are to find an Orton Gillingham trained tutor or a tutor who's trained in the Barton method. And when we first learned that one of our children had dyslexia, we couldn't afford a program like that. And so I went into a homeschool bookstore in Oregon and I asked, what's the next best thing for a family who could not pay for Orton Gillingham or Barton tutors? I was shown All About Spelling at that time. I'm not sure if All About Reading was around then, or if the bookstore only had All About Spelling at that time, but that's what I was shown. And so that's what we started using. But both of the programs, All About Spelling, and later when I found All About Reading, I bought that too. Those are excellent programs and a good place to start if private tutoring is outside of your budget. But also, if you have the budget, then Orton Gillingham or Barton are really the gold standard. And which one is best depends on who you're talking to. Another thing that worked for our child, one of our children who had dyslexia, was engaging the right side of the brain. So in Oregon, we did this through an art program for homeschoolers. So when our dyslexic child began painting and drawing and doing clay animation and Lego animation, and actually he spent a whole day every week at this art school for homeschoolers, which felt like a really big sacrifice because he was needing to learn how to read, and he was 9 years old at this point. We had tried every phonics program, everything. We'd been working so hard, and really we could have spent 5 days a week or more focusing on phonics and getting him to read. But when he spent time doing right side brain activities, that just, I think it eased the stress in his life so much that he was able to learn how to read that year. So it might seem backwards to stop doing phonics, stop focusing on the reading, and do something beautiful and fun, but try it and see if that works for your child. So in another speech that I give at Teach Them Diligently, I share about focusing on the beautiful things in your homeschool, and I really encourage that. Focus on classical music and on having tea parties, even with boys and girls. Read poetry, go outside, look at flowers, look at art together. Do these things, spend time doing this. Don't just focus on the rigid homeschool subjects like phonics and math. So moving on, there are other learning disabilities to consider in addition to dyslexia. So it'd be worth exploring this topic to find out where your child struggles and what methods help with that type of disability. So on the blog, I actually have some disability quizzes that I hope are helpful for you. Number 2, consider health issues. So a child who doesn't feel well will not have the energy to learn. Have you ever had, let's say, just like a tooth pain or a back pain that just won't go away? Have you noticed that it's really hard to focus during that time? Some children are so stoic and able to cover up low energy or a general feeling of being unwell or even pain. Maybe they have a high pain tolerance, but still that pain can impact their brain's ability to think and focus. So health issues may come out in attitude or in behaviors instead. It can be really difficult to uncover this. Some health issues are not seen in a typical well child visit either. So we found some of these techniques to be useful with our kids. Avoiding a particular food for a season to see if health concerns or behaviors are improved. Seeing a naturopath to find out if the child has any underlying food sensitivities or allergies. Trying a gut healing diet, like the GAPS diet, which is gut and psychology syndrome, which was developed for children on the autism spectrum. SCD diet, the SCD diet, which stands for specific carbohydrate diet. It's really similar to GAPS. Or Whole30, that's a little more doable for families because GAPS and SED can be pretty restrictive and difficult, and you might feel like you're in the kitchen all day. So our family was on the GAPS diet for 3 years, actually. So we were working on helping Isaac grow because he was failure to thrive, and he stopped vomiting on the GAPS diet. It also helped me with a lot of health issues. So it was really amazing for our family. It's not really meant to be a lifetime diet, but for a season, it's really good. So other things that are helpful, and I need to say I'm not a doctor, but I did take a 1-year course in nutrition through the Nutrition Therapy Association. but I'm not a doctor. Consult your doctor about these things. But starting a child just on some probiotics and fish oil, those things are just really helpful basics to help a child's gut. And the gut and the brain are very connected. When a baby forms in the womb, the first two cells, there's one cell first, then they split off and there's two cells. One becomes the gut and one becomes the brain, and they have an equal number of hormones in them. And it's really important to manage our gut for our brain, for the sake of our brain. So to keep our gut healthy. Also, 75% of our immune system for our body resides in our gut tissue. So, really important to keep that gut healthy for so many reasons, for our health and for our brain. So in my nutrition course, as I studied over the year, I realized that nearly every disease seemed to be helped by fish oil, probiotics, vitamin C, and fresh beet juice. So, juicing beets, and you can put them in little ice cube trays and freeze them, and then just pop out one and let it defrost on the counter and drink that. So those were helpful for nearly every disease. So yeah, try those. Other superfoods to introduce to your children include homemade chicken broth. We cook chicken broth probably every other week. I think if we were doing things the way, like my ideal way of life, it would be weekly, but that's not how we do things right now. Fermented foods like fresh sauerkraut, those are really good for the gut. Also, kefir, water kefir, yogurt without the sugar. But foods like that are really good for the gut. So avoid food coloring and sugar. See if that changes your child's behaviors, because a lot of times food color, especially, is changing a child's behavior. And then also sugar can really impact kids' moods. So consult your doctor about any supplements. I can't give medical advice here. But also, does your child seem to always have a stuffy nose? Does he wake up groggy or get sleepy after meals? These are things to pay attention to and talk to your doctor about. Do you notice big attitudes during times that your child might have low blood sugar? So we had one foster child who did have really grumpy moods every morning when he woke up. And so we had to make sure to give that child a snack. So our go-to was string cheese then, because it was a little protein. But also it was just something just to um, uh, give him, boost his blood sugar a little bit in the morning in a healthy way. So that's what we did for him. So consider that for your child. So also think of foods like firewood in this way. Proteins and fats are the large logs that keep the fire burning for hours. They give energy that lasts. Carbs are the kindling, and they're necessary for the fire to start, but they really don't last very long. And the sweets are like the paper. They just flame up really quick and burn out. And so that can actually cause moods too, because if your child's blood sugar spikes really high and then just drops and crashes, your child can have big moods, hard time focusing. So make sure your child is getting a variety of healthy foods, the whole rainbow of vegetables, and make sure there's plenty of healthy fats and proteins, along with some healthy carbs and limited sweets, limited paper in that fire. So if you have a really picky child who won't eat their veggies, think about using recipes that hide vegetables in the food. So there were two cookbooks that came out when my kids were little called The Sneaky Chef and Deceptively Delicious, and they had recipes with hidden vegetables in them. So you could try that if you feel up to that. So consider all of that and adjust things and find professional help if needed. Number 3, consider praying for your child. So I'm sure you actually pray for your child if you're a believer in Jesus. What I'm talking about is intense, focused prayer for the specific child you're struggling with. There's a book by Stormy O. Martin called The Power of a Praying Parent. That's helpful because it's full of specific prayers and lots of scripture. She also wrote The Power of a Praying Wife, I think it's called. Have you thought about fasting and praying for your child? So sometimes it's hard to come to a point to pray for the child that's the hardest on us. If a child is pushing us away, really difficult, it's hard to want to pray for that child, but it's really important to do so. The Bible tells us even to pray for our enemies. So how much more would God want us to pray for the child that He gifted us with, who we just simply don't understand? Also, this might be a bit uncomfortable, but have you considered the possibility of spiritual warfare? I'm not saying that every child who fights homeschooling is demon possessed or influenced by demons. I don't think that's true. I think if you're dealing with that kind of spiritual warfare, you would really already sense it. You would know it. Um, so we have faced that kind of battle before. We knew that our battle was not against flesh and blood. It was really clear to us. And it was really helpful for us to find a team of people to pray over our child for that. So the cool thing about praying is that it doesn't require buying anything. So if you have a relationship with the one true God through His Son, Jesus Christ, you can go to Him anytime and intercede for your child. Everything I've mentioned so far has cost some money, maybe books or programs or tutors, but this is free. You could start this today. Number 4, consider attachment issues. We adopted 4 of our kids and we've fostered 11. So we're keenly aware of attachment issues like RAD, which is reactive attachment disorder. Did you know that biological kids can have attachment issues too? Often these children had a rough birth or health issues as a baby, or mom had health issues or trauma during the pregnancy, or the child faced some kind of early trauma, maybe a lot of fighting in the home, or big move, or something major like flooding in the home and everybody had to move, or something like that, when the child was a baby. Any situation that disrupted a baby's needs cycle or made a baby feel unsafe, or that the adults in their life simply couldn't meet their needs, could potentially lead to attachment issues. And I'm not saying this as a guilt trip to you, mom. If you're thinking through things in your child's past that you're like, oh no, I wish the child hadn't had to live through that. I'm not saying any of this is a guilt trip. I'm just trying to help you be a detective and figure out what the cause was so that you can figure out the answers to the issues. So sometimes attachment issues will cause a child to fight you when you pull out the school books because a child struggles to respect you as the authority. And, this is because they're not attached, or they struggle with attachment. They might be a little bit attached, but they struggle. And so they push you away as authority. It's not a matter of more discipline or a stricter approach. And again, like I said earlier, let's not assume that the child is bad. We're assuming the best of our child, and then we're approaching them with love, compassion, grace, and then focusing on healing that relationship, helping that child attach. So my husband and I have sat through countless hours of training on attachment issues in adoption and foster care classes, adoption camps, retreats, intensives, and time with counselors, but we are not experts, and so I only have little bits to share with you here. And I wrote a book about how to adopt children and shared our stories about that, but I have said I will never be able to write the book about how to parent a child with attachment issues because we still struggle with them in our day-to-day life, and it's hard, and it's a kind of parenting that requires you to step outside of what you feel like doing for after a child has pushed you away and displayed big behaviors. You really have to step outside of yourself and what you're feeling and do what's best for that child in that moment, and it's hard. And so I'm not going to write a book about that. I'll tell you a few things here that we've learned, but just know that you're not hearing this from an expert or somebody who's figured it out. So if you saw day-to-day life in my home, you'd see a lot of slip-ups, a lot of, oh man, messed that up. Wish I did that better. So, yeah, so attachment issues can look like arguing and opposition, rule breaking, sneakiness, destruction of property, difficulty with friendships and sibling relationships, pushing away from affection, and self harm. Some of the things on this list are perfectly normal for children. I say that when you have a child with reactive attachment disorder, which is really the extreme of attachment issues, it's like normal behaviors times 25, or some days like it's times 100. By arguing in opposition, I mean everything is an argument, every little detail. By rule breaking, I mean the child will constantly put his or her toe over the line and will smirk about it. By sneakiness, I mean you feel like you might need cameras all over your house and alarms on your doors because you can't even trust the child to go around a corner without adult supervision. You wonder sometimes, like, I thought we should have been past this at, the age of 2 or whatever, when a child goes around a corner and does something they shouldn't do and you train them not to. But, you're at the age of 9 or 10 or 15 and the child is still doing these things, but maybe bigger things now because they're older. So destruction of property, maybe overt and obvious, like holes in doors or walls, or I've had friends who've had to call the police on their children because of broken windows and violence. So it might be obvious like that. But it might be more subtle, like holes picked in clothing, pencils chewed up, and sometimes that's fidgetiness. Sometimes that isn't an attachment issue, but sometimes it is intentional because the child just like ruins kind of everything in their path. Um, and I'm not saying again these children are bad, so they're not bad. It's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying discipline for all of these things, or turn harsh on them for all of these things, but these are just the defining things that I'm mentioning. So there's a fine line between the fidgety child and the one who's ruining things on purpose. So just pay attention to that. And don't jump to the conclusion that it's always on purpose. It might just be a fidgety child with some, ADD tendencies and or ADHD, and they just have to move, or other labels. I'm not really sure what they all are, but something that makes their body need to move and do things constantly. So difficulty with friendships and sibling relationships. Kids with attachment issues just aren't very friendly sometimes. They don't put others first often. They might say rude things. They might learn vulnerable things about a friend or a sibling and then share that thing to be rude, to be mean. They might destroy other people's property. They might lack some social boundaries that are necessary for good relationships. So it makes it really hard for them. Makes it hard for the people around them too, but it makes it hard for them too. So, pushing away from affection. So they don't want hugs. They turn stiff. We've, done foster care and had babies, like a baby that didn't even cry for her needs to be met, didn't want to be held, didn't reach to be held either. But another sign of attachment issue can be that child had a sibling who was 2, who wanted to be held all the time, was clingy and whiny and needed to like be on me always. The baby didn't want anything to do with me, but the 2-year-old wanted to cling to me constantly. And those are both attachment issues. It's just kind of two extremes of it, two different signs of it. So self-harm can mean picking at themselves. It can be, like girls have their hair in and they're pulling it out constantly, or picking at their skin, making little pock marks constantly, or it could be worse than that. It could be intentional self-harm with things that could turn into weapons. So help for attachment issues. There are a couple of great books I recommend in order to address attachment issues. And again, I'm not writing the book on this. So this is the last slide on attachment issues because this is really all I have, guys. I'm sorry. I wish I could give more hope and help for this. But just know that if you're dealing with this, I'm there too. So we're in this together. But the great books. So the late Dr. Karen Purvis wrote a book called The Connected Child, and she's really the gold standard in attachment therapy. She's amazing. If you can get a hold of her video training, you'll be really blessed to see how sweet she was with the children that she worked with. So, attaching through love, hugs, and play, simple strategies to help build connections with your child by Deborah D. Gray. She's great too. We've seen Dr. Deborah Gray speak and share her techniques at multiple adoption conferences we went to in Seattle. She is delightful. She's gentle. I just really appreciate her. I always wish that we lived close enough that she could have been a counselor for one of our kids because she is just lovely. So read her book, Connection Parenting, Parenting Through Connection Instead of Coercion, Through Love Instead of Fear by Pam Leo. That's another good one. I saw Pam Leo speak at the Wild and Free conference in Franklin, Tennessee a couple of years ago. Her descriptions of parenting interactions were so loving and gentle. I really liked her and her ideas. So, also, therapy with horses and other animals is also helpful. The very best treatment centers for RAD in the country use golden retrievers to get kids to attach first to an animal, and then they can learn to attach to humans. So, yeah, use an animal. If you know that that child is healthy around animals. If a child has had physical or sexual abuse and shows any signs that they might do that to animals or children, or other children, obviously protect other animals and other children. But one of the very good attachment therapists in Oregon who always had a waiting list and people flying out to see her, had a mini pony in her office. I just thought that was really cool. So there's something about animals that helps kids. But again, just make sure that child is going to be safe with animals and not hurt them because that can make the child get worse. So if your child has attachment issues, they may be the child you want to send away to school the most. And I encourage you not to. Push through this. Try. It's okay to outsource and get some help a couple days a week if you can, but really work on bonding with that child as much as you can. So this is a child who needs to spend time the most with you. If you have an opportunity to spend more time with this child while they are still under the age of 11, please do so because 11 is not a magical age, but it tends to be when kids naturally push away from their parents. So if you can really focus and get the child attached before the age of 11, do it. So if you're seeking therapy for attachment issues, I highly recommend EMDR, which I don't remember what the acronym stands for. It's something about eye movement, something, but it's really good. Splunkna is also another good program. I recommend those over play therapy. So we've had just some bad play therapy situations where I didn't really feel like it was helpful. I feel like it actually made kids worse. So that's what I recommend. So number 5, consider a curriculum change. So perhaps your child is fighting the curriculum and not you. Maybe the child needs less bookwork, less worksheets, and more time to explore the outdoors or focus on a subject that they're interested in. Maybe your child needs more physical activity during the day, perhaps skipping or marching or jumping while skip counting or memorizing facts would help. This can be particularly challenging if you're participating in a school program, like a private school, a public school, or a hybrid program where they tell you what to teach on the days of the week that you're teaching. If your child is fighting the curriculum, perhaps a change of pace will reduce the load and help though. On the flip side of a curriculum that's too rigid is the possibility that the curriculum is too loose. Maybe your child needs a little bit more of a rigid schedule to feel safe and to feel like you're really doing school. Is your child craving a structured school day and a few handwriting worksheets to make it feel official? Go with that then. Do what your child needs. Consider what the curriculum looks like and what might be best for each of your children. So pray that God would guide you in determining exactly what your child needs. So here's a suggestion for you. So with all of our kids' learning struggles in mind, I created a homeschool reading program, homeschool reading plans that work for the whole family. I've tried so many different curriculums, and I came up with this one on my own after facing years and years of curriculum not really fitting our family. So, the star reading plans are for whole family homeschooling. They're created so for whole family learning. The whole family is studying the same subjects at the same time. One of the most beautiful things about homeschooling is the opportunity to gather the whole family together around the table or on a rug together or on comfy couches or on a picnic blanket outside and to study a subject all together. It's a different picture from public school where everyone in every grade is studying a different period of history and a different science subject and different authors all together. So, so many homeschool programs tend to mimic public school in this way, and the family's learning is disjointed and there's not connected, and it takes a lot of time from the homeschool mom to keep up with what each child is doing, to make sure they're all following through, and to read aloud the books that need to be read aloud for each different child. And there's no discussion amongst the siblings about the topics that they're learning together. And while it may not be possible to study math and language arts all together, unless your children are very close in age, there are several subjects that can be taught in this way. So I created homeschool reading plans, and they're at the STAR website, starhomeschool.org, and they follow. So they're designed so that the following subjects can be learned together as a family: handicrafts, Bible, hymns, apologetics, literature, history, geography, nature studies, science, composer, artist, poet, character, and life skills. So middle school and high school students have additional reading with bigger concepts than their younger siblings might be able to grasp. But um, yeah, otherwise they're learning together as a family. So the reason this works for children who fight homeschooling is we're working on building family bonds while we homeschool. We're all interacting with the same characters, the same stories, the same scenes, the same places, the same time periods. We're creating memories together as we homeschool. We're discussing big concepts together. It's really beautiful. We're using a flexible reading schedule that can be adjusted to fit each child's needs. And if you've ever dreamt of having a curriculum that would work for your whole family and that could be tailored to fit your family perfectly, you might want to check out the Star Homeschool Reading Plans. So I have on this slide that I was at booth 746, and that was at the Teach Them Diligently convention. That doesn't apply right now. I'm not at a booth, obviously, but you can go to the website, starhomeschool.org, and check it out. Number 6, consider your child's learning style. Have you ever had a child roll her eyes when you sit down to read a book? I have. It's really difficult because I consider myself a Charlotte Mason mom. I love sitting down with my kids and reading a good book. So I've learned though that a couple of my kids have auditory processing issues. One would argue, complain, and roll their eyes every time we read. Another would get distracted, fidget, and do other things whenever I read. And whatever I was reading would go right over that child's head. Those same kids are extremely fast at reading chapter books on their own, like crazy fast, where we didn't even believe that they were really reading the content and like grasping it. When we've quizzed those kids, they really did absorb the books by reading that fast. So it's like a super skill that God has given them because they struggle with the audio processing. It's kind of interesting that that goes hand in hand. So, we have another child who had dyslexia, has dyslexia and didn't read until 9 years old, who thrived on audiobooks. And that child listened to every YWAM biography she could get her hands on. And now she wants to be a brain surgeon because of Ben Carson's story. And she's in high school and loves biology and dissecting animals. And she actually loves quizzes and tests, which is odd, but she does. And so every child is just so different. So it's important to pay attention to our kids and figure out what their learning styles are instead of forcing them into a box and just deciding that everybody in our family is going to do this particular way of learning. We might need to adjust things for our children or change it up a bit so that each child has a chance to learn in their ways. So there's an article on HLSEA to help you determine your child's learning style. You can go to the QR code on this slide and find that. And then Kathy Duffy has a learning styles questionnaire, and I've linked to some others as well that are just kind of fun. Figure out if your child has a learning disability. If your child is not an auditory learner, it doesn't mean that you have to give up reading out loud together. Some tricks that I've learned are keep the time short, let the child read a portion of the day's reading so that they're reading it out loud. And then I'll buy multiple copies of the book that we're reading out loud, or if it's a public domain book, I'll print multiple copies of it so we all have it. And so that that child can follow along in their copy of the book as we read. If your child is a tactile learner or a kinesthetic learner, you may need more hands-on materials for that. Number 7, consider your approach. I don't want to add any guilt to you, Mama, so I want to say that first as we talk about this subject. I know it's easy to blame ourselves and think it's all my fault, or wonder what things would be like if I'd only known blank when the child was younger. Please don't go there. This is not meant to point fingers at you. I think self-reflection with grace and not guilt is good for all of us once in a while. For example, when I'm homeschooling, am I being gentle? Am I being too gentle? Am I being fun? Am I being loving? Am I being patient? Am I being consistent? Am I being clear about my expectations? Am I being enjoyable to be around? Or maybe am I being a little too strict, a little too hurried, a little too distracted, a little frustrated, worried about getting through the workbook before summer hits, thinking about things going on in the world instead of discipling the kids right in front of me? Speaking of which, I shared this on social media. This was actually back, I think in 2021 when I shared this, because I aspire to be this. I'm not saying I've achieved this, okay? So the world is falling apart, but homeschool moms are like, and it just shows Maria and the kids from Sound of Music, and she's playing a guitar. I can't say that I've pulled out my guitar anytime recently to play the 4 or 5 chords I've memorized. And it's definitely easy to let current news impact our day with our kids or whatever we saw when we were scrolling. Oh, technology. Let this picture stick with us though, moms. Our sweet children need us to be strong and gentle and present and loving for them no matter what's going on in the world. Do I take time to play games with my kids? To read out loud and snuggle with them? To listen to them? I know it's hard, especially with a child who talks a lot or even one who barely speaks and you have to pull everything out. Am I being my very best self with my kids during the day? This takes moment by moment reflection, leaning on God and praying for His strength. Am I offering up the gifts God has given me in this beautiful ministry of motherhood and home education? Or am I creating any kind of stumbling block or hindrance in my child's ability to learn? The book, The Call of the Wild and Free, Reclaiming the Wonder in Your Child's Education, A New Way to Homeschool by Ainsley Arman, who created Wild and Free, was particularly helpful for me, and I wished I had read it years earlier. Again, don't dwell on guilt though. Let's not focus on what we had wished we did when our kids were younger. let's pick up and move on. Where can we go from here? Pray, set some goals, write them down. Now write down a couple of manageable action steps, and accomplish these goals. I like to write my goals in a planner, and I always seem to actually accomplish goals when I work with full focus planners. They're kind of pricey though, so you don't have to go with that. But I also make a planner, a homeschool planner. It's not a planner for just your everyday stuff, but it's a homeschool planner, and it's on the Star Store. Or you can just use a notebook or a scrap of paper, just whatever you've got. Make sure to look at it regularly so that you can check off your action steps. In the hard times and in all times, it really helps to memorize scripture with my kids. So try Hide Them in Your Heart and Seeds Family Worship for 2 options, and play hymns and classical hymns. I've played Jeff Bjork's hymns, their piano hymns, in my home, especially on really difficult days when I had kids screaming or having big moods. I just played that music. I've been doing that for, I think, maybe almost 2 decades now, maybe 15 years, maybe almost 20. So we have a chalkboard, and I can't tell you how many times I've written Galatians 6:9 on it. This has been my life verse, really. So let's read that together. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Galatians 6:9. I have needed that verse. You might need it too. So in my session at Teach Them Diligently, I handed out a coloring sheet with this verse on it for the moms. So I have that, I think, attached to the blog post. So go ahead and go to the QR code if you want to just download the coloring sheet. So here are some tips for some tricky situations. So set some clear tech boundaries for your kids. So we actually don't let our kids have cell phones unless they are old enough, meaning they need it. They're going places without us, and they need to contact us. They need it for emergency sake. So we wouldn't let a younger child have a phone just for the sake of having a phone. We don't do that. And even at first, when our kids have phones, they have a family phone that we share. They're, it just get plugged in the family area. And then our kids move up to Gab phones, which don't have any internet on them, or I think all they can really do is listen to the radio. They can text, they can take photos and use a calculator. It's like pretty much it. There's not much on it. So that is really helpful. And then our kids work their way up. Our kids don't get any social media until they're 18 years old. We just don't allow it in our home. So even when they do get a phone that's not a Gab phone, then it's pretty locked down with parental controls and passwords and stuff like that. Phones don't go in bedrooms ever or in private spaces. Phones are used in public areas in the home and then plugged in downstairs, in public areas. So, and then we set rules of no screens until or unless. So, our 2 older girls who have phones, they're 18 and 16, will come to me or their dad, and they'll say, I've done the things I needed to do today. Can I have my phone? And so the lists change depending on the moment or what we, decide to add to it. It seems like the list gets a little longer sometimes, but so like I did my math. I cleaned my room. One of our daughters has a treatment every morning for an allergy she has. And so she did her treatment that she needs to take. Can I have my phone? Or I did my chores. Can I have my phone? Math is always important before. So that just needs to get done. So set boundaries like that. I personally do not hand phones to my children. I don't hand my phone to my children to play games on. I never have done that. I just don't do that. I don't get screens for kids to play on. The only exception is for our 10-year-old, almost 11-year-old. She has a Leapfrog that's only used on road trips. So educational games on road trips, and that's it. We don't use it any other time, actually. So, and then use incentives wisely. So what I mean by that is use incentives and rewards that your kids actually like. Use ones that you can actually follow through with, um, and then do that. So also use movement. So movement can really help change a child's brain out of whatever mood they're in. So if they're grumpy or if they're stressed, they are not going to be able to focus on school. So whenever they're in fight or flight, whenever anybody is in fight or flight, like think about it. If you're in a really stressed situation, something's happened and you're very stressed, you cannot do the budget in that moment, probably, or do a complex math equation in that moment. Kids are the same way. They can't do it. So if they're really stressed about something, whatever it is, they just can't do their school. And so movement can help with that. It can help just reset their brain. So jumping, doing jumping jacks, jumping on a mini trampoline or even on a big trampoline can help. Going on a walk. So another thing that I've used many times through our homeschooling is resetting or changing the scenery. So what I mean by that is just suddenly change what you're doing. So that might be let's go outside and let's go hunt for slugs right now, or let's go hop together like bunnies, or let's pull out the teacups. We're going to have a tea party while we read our next book. Or let's have a pillow fight. Or let's pull out a joke book right now. Or let's call grandma, chat with grandma. Or let's all do an art project or something like that. Just something that changes what you're doing. I know it might feel so frustrating because you just need to get your to-do list done and whatever your school items were. And suddenly this is a distraction from that, right? But no, it's really not. You're just helping your child maybe for 5, 10, 15 minutes reset their brain so that they can actually learn. Because if you keep trying to push it, especially with math or handwriting or phonics or reading, something that your child really, really struggles with, if you keep trying to push it and push it and push it, you're just going to hurt that relationship. The child isn't really going to learn. You're not going to get it done. And then everybody's going to feel just hurt and upset and frustrated at the end of that. So just stop. Do something else and then come back to it. So, and then try connecting, try hugging, tickling, just, listen to that child, listen to the child's stress. What is it that's really bothering them that moment? And then another thing for tricky situations is to go to the rules. So we had rules posted when our kids were younger. There's a chart from Doorposts that you can get called the if-then chart, and it has some basic ways that kids might break rules in the home. And then it has a Bible verse in King James Version, and then it has a blank place to write what the consequences are. So just make sure you've got your rules posted, and then, go to the rules chart and check it for some situations. If it's past the point of, you've tried all of these options of moving and resetting and trying food to increase the blood sugar, and you've tried connecting, and you can see this is actually just an obedience issue, then you need to go to the rules. So number 9, just some final encouragement. This season is short. My kids have grown up so fast. We have 4 adult kids now, and I really cannot believe it. And I really hope that encourages you, because the hard days are not going to last forever. Another piece of encouragement is that all of those negative images you have in your mind of how this is going to go someday, if the child keeps, disobeying or doesn't learn math or doesn't learn how to read, what their life is going to be like, all the negative that's going through your mind. I just want to say, because I do have 4 adult kids now, and I'm on the other side of that with 4 of them, it probably isn't going to end up as bad as you think. It hasn't for me. I'm just really grateful for that, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. So, and then the last bit of encouragement is you are exactly who your child needs. So, God didn't make a mistake when He placed you as that child's mom. So, you are exactly where you need to be. They're exactly where they need to be. And you can do this with God's strength. So, that is all I've got. Thanks for hanging out and listening to this today. You can find all the resources I've mentioned at that QR code. Go ahead and scan that, and feel free to leave a comment below. Let me know what you think.